Welcome to JustWannaQuilt, a research podcast coming out of Tulane University Law School, where we explore all kinds of things, stories about quilting, tools, field trips, maybe some famous quilters stop by, and, of course, a little bit of copyright thrown in just for fun. I'm Dr. Elizabeth Townsend Guard. I'm a law professor, and I just want to quilt. So, today we're talking to Andrea Tsang Jackson. She is super cool. She does patterns that are paper piecing patterns. She's from Canada, from Halifax, and she's been working, she's got she was an in-resident, resident thing, I don't know, artist in resident at the Canadian Museum of Immigration, where she did a quilting project. She's going to talk about that, and she's also got this weird, interesting thing about a quilting song, and she's got a whole like Indiegogo thing where they're raising money about a project and a song and stuff. So anyway, we will talk with her. She's called Third Story Workshop, and she's cool.
Yeah, my name is Andrea Tsang Jackson. I'm calling from Halifax, Nova Scotia, in Canada.
So awesome. And tell me your first memory of someone sewing or quilting in your life.
My mom was a sewer. She did not sew quilts that I knew of. I actually just found out that she did do a few things quilting related. But really as a kid, she made my sister and I matching dresses every Easter and Christmas, pretty much, as we were growing up.
Yeah.
Matching. Yeah. And she helped us with dance costumes. She did dance costumes. She helped design the dance costumes for our classes up until we were about 10.
Very sweet.
Yeah. So she was a hobby sewer, and she was really good at it. Really, I didn't realize till much later how much attention she paid to detail and how she took patterns and just made them her own.
That's really cool. And so when did you start quilting?
I started quilting in 2011. I have a design background, and so I was like, I'll design my own quilt. I'm having a baby, my first baby in 9 months, so I'd like to make a quilt for him or her. And so I designed a quilt. I knew nothing about quilting, so I went to a shop that specialized in quilts. I didn't know there were different varieties, but this was, not your mainstream chain store. So I found it, and it was in a suburb of Ottawa, Canada, and talked to them there. I had a cutting mat from my schooling, so I needed, the rulers, the cutters, the fabrics, and so I knew the color palette I wanted to use was the orange and yellow and gray, so modern colors, but I knew nothing about the modern quilting movement, let's say. So this shop was fairly traditional. It had a small shelf of solids that I didn't notice till quite a bit later. So I used prints, but in a fairly, let's say, modern color palette. And that was my first quilts, and I designed it myself. Didn't know about flying geese, didn't know about squaring up my fabric really, or anything really. I just did it.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And what are you, so once you realized that there was like a whole world out there with a whole bunch of different techniques, did you feel like you wanted to keep on your own, doing your own stuff, or did you start to learn? Like, this is so funny because you're like super creative, and super creative people are like, oh, I can just do it this way, right? Like, that's part of the creativity. But then there's all these things of like, here's how you do a half square triangle. Here's how you do this. Here's how you do that. Like, did you feel like you ever fell into the here's how to do stuff space? And was that good for you or not good for you?
Not until much, much later. Really, a turning point for me was, when I say I started quilting seriously 2.5 years ago, it was because I joined a guild. And that is when I discovered that there were techniques that have been established for many, many decades and years and centuries. And before that I had made 4 quilts. So, when my second child was born, I made him it took me 2 years because I had 2 small children at the time. But I made him an hourglass quilt with 25 different solid colors. And that was really when I felt like I could find a voice in quilting. Yeah. And, I did not know it was called an hourglass block, but there were over 2,000 little triangles in this quilt.
Wow.
So I had no idea that I could have done it a different way instead of triangle by triangle.
That's really interesting.
Yeah. So not until I joined a guild did I realize that there was a whole world of resources and techniques, different ways to do things. And also I started realizing that I could legitimately just do things the way I wanted to do them,
Yeah.
even if there was a better way, or
Right. It's you could do it any way
yeah,
you want. There's
yeah.
really no rules, right? Like,
Look,
yeah. All right. So now you are tell me where you are in your quilting life. You are a quilt entrepreneur. You still have kids, right? I think
yeah,
probably.
yeah.
And tell me what's going on with your world now.
Okay, so in the last couple of years, I suddenly had a business. It
Yeah.
was very random. I My kids were 2 and 4, and
Mm-hmm.
my younger one was starting preschool. So I was going to have a bit more time on my hands.
Yeah.
I wasn't working at the time. I was working out of the house at the time. I was a stay-at-home parent, and so I was like, What can I do? I have a background in architecture. I have a lot of design experience in graphics and in 3D physical design. So what can
Yeah.
I do that I can be flexible with? And my husband was like, well, you started this quilting stuff, and it seems like you really find joy and energy and life in it. What about designing quilt patterns for quilters to use? So I was like, oh, okay. And so I joined my local modern quilt guild, the Maritime Modern Quilt Guild, just to see what these people were into and what would appeal to them, and and then that opened a whole world to me. I applied to actually be part of a crafters market here. One of my favorite craft shows in town is called the Halifax Crafters Society, and because I started making designing these gemstone quilts, I thought they were very modern, and I think that people,
They're really
felt
cool.
like
So
people,
is it the geometric art, the gemstone paper piecing pattern? I'm on your Etsy
yeah,
shop.
yeah,
So if people are listening, I'll put the link to it. I'll just put the link to the pattern. It is really cool. So the thing that's cool about your stuff, first, it's very modern. If you like modern, which I adore modern, but it's got a lot of different colors. Like you have to get different colors, but it's got a depth to it, which is really interesting. It looks like it is a gem,
mm-hmm.
which is really interesting, right? Is that kind of what you were going for?
Yeah, definitely. And I was inspired by this artist named Kurt Pio. He's from South Africa, and he does these large scale paintings of gemstones. So they're very, very detailed, millions of shades of colors. I was like, how can this happen in textiles? How can this happen with fabric? So
I'm just going to pause. Tell me again who that you were inspired by.
Kurt Pio.
Kurt. And how do you spell the last name? P-E?
Pio.
P-I-O. Okay, cool. Awesome. So tell me a little bit more about that inspiration part, because I'm really interested.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking at his stuff now. Oh, wow. Okay,
yeah.
That's cool. So he's from South Africa. Oh, my gosh. They're gargantuan. Yeah. Okay.
These are obviously artworks. But I was like, well, I didn't know anything about copyright really.
Right.
But I was like inspired, and I was like, how can I render this in fabric?
Right.
That is, there was a design problem here for me. I was like, how do I design this so I could sell them at a reasonable price?
Right.
And spend a finite number of hours on a piece, but also be able to replicate multiple pieces. So I designed them. I simplified. I looked at. I didn't start with any of his paintings. I just went right to how a gemologist would cut, a geologist would cut, a gemologist would cut a stone. And so I looked at those drawings and I overlaid them. So the design was completely generated from a kind of a technical standpoint.
So I'm at his website, and so let's break that down just a little bit, because that's a perfect example. So his stuff, it keeps going. It's on a Carol, so I can't get that. It's really annoying. Oh, I can hit pause. Okay. So his stuff is really cool. It's Kurt, as you said, Pio. And hold on, let me grab the image. Oh, it was the wrong image. And you're right. So not that you're right, but I see what you're saying. So he makes these really huge geometric things, and sometimes paints naked. You don't. That's very funny. And hold on. Let me see if I can get to. Okay. So, and they look really different from yours, right? They aren't yours. You're not copying his thing. They don't look like, I mean, you go, oh yeah, I can see. So that's idea expression. So he doesn't have it. So we're just gonna do a little copyright lesson for people listening. So
Great.
So okay. So Andrea you found this really cool artist. You're like, oh, he does geometric diamond-like shapes. And then you decided to do your own version. Now he's painting them, as you said, right? Mm-hmm. And yours don't even look like his, right? I mean, you could see the inspired by, but in terms of idea expression dichotomy, Kurt doesn't have a lock on, making diamonds that out of other mediums, right? You took that idea and then you made it your own, and that's okay to do. That's totally okay. That's what copyright wants. We don't want to lock up ideas. He doesn't get to do that. He doesn't get to have that technique. Not that he's claiming to, but I'm saying that that's exactly what. So then when we look at your stuff, gemstone painting, you can see the inspiration, but it's really different. His is more like, I mean, just they're very different, and they're different, not just the medium, but the way they look. So idea expression. The expression is what's protected, not the idea. Okay.
Expression is now I have to write this down.
Yeah. The expression is protected, right? So if the example we always use in my law school class is Romeo and Juliet. So Romeo and Juliet, Shakespeare, it's in the public domain. Anybody can do it. The expression of that, it can be West Side Story. It can be Warm Bodies, which is a zombie movie that's Romeo and Juliet, or Nomeo and Juliet, my personal fave. But that expression, Romeo and Juliet, Warm Bodies, West Side Story, that's all protected, right? But the idea of like two families that don't like each other and the kids fall in love, that's not protected. And the original isn't protected because it's in the public domain. So, but the idea of that, so there's a thing called the spectrum of infringement. And so the question is like, is it the idea? When is it an idea? And when does it become the expression, which is protectable? So if it's an idea like diamonds, cool. Somebody else sees your stuff and goes, oh, I'm going to do diamonds too. Now, at what point does what somebody else is doing, like another quilter doing it, suddenly infringe on your stuff? And that's where it gets gray, right? So the idea of a diamond is great. Then somebody taking your pattern and copying it directly, like just taking your pattern and selling it, totally infringement, easy to figure out. That in-between part where someone's infringing your stuff, it kind of looks like your stuff, they've had access to your stuff, but it's not quite your stuff, that's where courts come into play.
Okay. There are a few quilt designers who are working on the same kind of topic, and we've had contact with each other. Yeah. You know, once I had this series that I had designed, I all of a sudden found somebody, Sarah Sharp, who had designed a stone.
Oh, let's take a look at that one. Okay. And how did she feel about it?
She felt fine. She was like, I can see how this is totally different from mine. We arrived at different results. The geometry is different. The level of difficulty is different. Like there's just so much that's different. She could definitely see the difference between her work and mine.
Yeah. Okay. Hold on. I'm trying to get to her, but I got to something else. Sarah Sharp.
It's called, I think it's Shine Bright Birthstone, I think is the name of the pattern.
Okay. Sarah Sharp. Shine Bright Birth. Let's see if that comes up. Sharp. Let's see if I can get my image. This is very hard-hitting journalism. Just kidding. Sometimes, because I've been doing a lot of these, I just forget we're taping, and I'm like, oh, let's just surf for a while. Then we have to cut it out.
Did you find it?
No.
Okay.
Let me see. On the cusp. No, there's too many. There's a singer that's Shara Sharp. That's
okay. Sharp with an E.
Sharp with an E at the end. Okay, cool. And is Sarah? Do we know what house about?
With an H.
Here I found it. SharaSharp.com. Let's see. Works.
I think it's in her
textiles. Open editions. Yeah, I haven't found it. I don't think I'm at the right Sarah Sharp.
Her website is No Hats in the House.
No Hats in the House. Okay.
Mm-hmm. It's actually
I love the name. I love the names of them. Everybody, you guys all are super creative. It's so great. No Hats in the House. We do not know why. So, okay, let's look at it.
I can't find it either, actually.
All right, you can't.